raised. Got to. Got to. Shake.
And I mean, there's a lot to be doing with the shock.
Yes.
A lot of manufacturers right now, I noticed you had King shocks on it. King will probably be a little more aggressive on their valving.
Yeah.
They usually put a little more valving in. And that we've noticed, we've been using some Fox shocks, that the standard Fox 2.0 shock has really super light valving. So it gives you this nice ride going down the road, but then when you get off-road, you'll notice it has like hardly any control. You'll hit something and it'll bottom out really easy, or it'll, you'll notice it'll like bounce on stuff like really
Right.
easy. Where what they're trying to do, they're going after that quality ride on the street, but then there's kind of a you're trying to get the best of both worlds, and it always doesn't work that way. So
Not with a 2.0.
that's the one nice thing about having maybe an adjustable shock,
Right.
that you could actually go out and kind of tune it to what, okay, that I like this ride on the street, and it's not too soft off road. And that's what we found with some of the shocks. And we've been using some of the higher end Fox shocks, which are super, they're really awesome. I mean, we've got some of their internal bypass shocks on our 1JK, took it out to King of the Hammers, and we're blasting around on some dirt roads out there, and we couldn't believe how good it worked. And it was just a single shock, no bump stop, no nothing, just a single shock. But you're looking at a shock that's over $1,000 per corner. I mean, that's a lot of money to spend on shocks. I mean, you're spending as much on shocks as you're spending on your whole lift kit.
Oh, yeah.
So, and we just put a set of the 2.5-inch Foxes on another customer's Jeep. A little less money. I think the retail is about $2,500, and I thought they worked really well for that shock. It wasn't harsh on the street, but it gave good control when you hit a bump. It had good bottom resistance to it. We haven't used it off road. This is just driving around here, but there's certain bumps we're taking down certain streets around here with speed bumps on them, or we got a street back here. It's got a couple cement culverts in it. We'll go through, So we'll go through and hit those just to get a feel for how it compares to other ones.
That's where Ray and I tested the JK suspension.
Yeah, so you get an idea,
Yeah.
And like sometimes the Jeeps feel maybe a little harsh with nobody in them when you're driving around by yourself, but most of the time when you're using it, you've got your ice chest in the back with your tool bag, and you may have instead of one person, you may have 2 or 3 people in there. So then you find out off road, hey, this actually works pretty good. So it's hard to get a balance of what works, but like I said, and you can spend as much money on shocks as you want to spend. So like I said,
Have you looked at the ones we're putting on?
I didn't look at them. I took them out of the box, or
Okay.
I took them out of the back of the Jeep, but I didn't open the boxes. So he said you had like a 2.5-inch Bilstein or something.
It's the Bilstein B8 8100.
Yeah.
So it's the external bypass.
Oh yeah.
And it's adjustable both in bump and rebound, and it has an internal bump stop.
Wow.
And you're talking about $1,000 a shock. These are $1,100 a shock.
Right. Yeah. I said you're $4,000 for.
Yeah. Now even at Summit, it's $4,000 for 4.
But if it has an internal bump stop, I mean, the shocks I have in my JK right now, I've got external bump stops, and I've got a bypass shock on it all the way around. I have Kings on it, and it works pretty good. I don't. I've had them on there for a couple of years now. I know when I'm empty, it feels a little harsh in the back, but normally I always have. Like we just did the Rubicon. We had it full of ice chests and gear, and everything stuffed. Much stuff you get in the back, it's full. It's filled to the top, so it works really good in those applications. And then usually once you get off road, you'll air down, and then you don't really feel the shock as much.
Right.
But yeah, that's one thing I was just telling the guys that back in the leaf spring days and the TJ days, if you spend $100 per corner on a shock, you're spending a lot of money. Now the guys are spending $1,000 per corner on a shock, and you know, and then you know, and that's just a regular shock. That's not a coilover or nothing like that.
Exactly.
But, you know, the nice thing about, you know, not using a coilover, you can get a pretty high-tech shock on each corner. When you go to the coilover, then there's, you know, you're using a coilover shock, which is probably going to be either a 2-inch or a 2.5 inch. And then to get your bypass, you're going to have another shock, or you're going to have to add a bump stop to that.
Right.
So that, you know, that adds up. The advantage to the coilover is your adjustable height. You know, makes it easy to, you could throw any spring on there and then get your height right with the adjuster. With the regular spring, you're relying on the spring to give you your height and hold it level and everything. So there's advantages and disadvantages to it.
So,
Yeah, I mean, normally when you're testing, you're just, you know, it's all seat of the pants.
Right.
Unless you have a really, really good guy. I mean, we've gone out with guys that, you know, tune shocks and have worked on the race car, and it's a lot of work.
oh, it is.
You know, it's one thing to adjust a couple knobs and, you know, bleed valves and stuff like that. It's another thing when you're setting up a race car and you have to pull the whole shock apart.
Yeah.
And we've been out there, you know, had the whole, you know, all the shocks off the car, put them all back on the car. The guy, you drive 20 feet and the guy building these shocks says, bring it back. I don't like something I just seen. I don't like the way it's working. And then take it all back apart again, you know. But when you're adjusting shocks on the outside,
Yeah.
there's only so much you could do on the outside anyways.
Right.
You know, I mean, you'll get it to a certain point and you're going, okay, I've got my my rebound completely open, and I want less rebound than that, or whatever. I've got my compression, you know, down to the point where if I close it any more off than this, it's gonna, you know, it's one thing in a Jeep. In a race car, you look at all that stuff. You know, how much pressure you're running in the shock. You can adjust shock and put a lot of valving in it, but if you put a lot of valving in it, it's gonna make the oil heat up quicker.
Mhm.
So ideally, you're gonna wanna run more spring and less valving, so the shock will actually last longer. It won't heat up as quick. So there's different criteria you're trying to meet. Where in a rock crawler, it's really about your ride comfort. You want it to a quality ride on the street that's not too soft or not too stiff. And then when you're off road, it's all about, you know, I need enough control, but I don't want to beat myself up either. I don't want it so stiff that every bump I hit, you know, it's bone jarring. So they're, you know.
The little rocks between the big rocks.
And then adjusting front and rear balance, you know, you make the front stiffer, it makes the rear feel lighter, or if you make the rear stiffer, it makes the front feel lighter, and vice versa.
Right.
So it's like I said, a lot of it is how much time you're willing to put into it, and then, you know, what you're satisfied with, you know, and, you know,
I
it's,
think when we do the testing, I think the plan, obviously, we're not gonna change valving, we're just
Yeah.
gonna adjust the external.
yeah, just
adjusters.
external, yeah.
But
And you need to find a road that, like the average road that you drive up and down,
Mhm.
because you don't want to adjust it to some road that's like with big huge bumps in, you know, that something you never drive that
Right,
fast over.
right.
I would go find a road that maybe has that chop in it, that little chop that makes it, you know, you want to when you're hitting that stuff, that it feels secure, that you're not like the tires are planted and it's not bouncing off the road, you know. So, you know, it's just something that makes it, you feel comfortable. And I tell you, all shocks work the same. They're all just, you know, it's just a hydraulic cylinder that you're valving to, you know, either speed up or let down the oil. But there's more to it, the size of the shaft, the size of the, you know, the ports going to the reservoirs, you know, especially in off-road shock, that stuff, the size of that stuff makes a difference. If the hose is too small, it won't let the oil flow as good. If they've got right angle fittings anywhere, it doesn't let the oil
Slows it
flow.
down.
So
there's a lot to building shocks.
a lot of times with a harsher shock in a JL, it will feel more harsh because the shocks are so wide on the axle. Or in the JK, it's only a few inches, but it's enough. You're holding the axle out here instead of in here, and when it rocks back and forth, you're actually feeling that because the shock
More
is
leverage.
Yeah, you have the shock has more leverage on the body,
Right.
Because
right.
it's wider.
Right.
And if you notice, like your JK, the the shock mounts on the inside of the frame,
Mhm.
in the back. On the JL, it mounts on the outside of the frame. And I've had guys say, hey, I just can't get this. It just feels weird. It feels like it has too much rear sway bar. And I go, well, it's not the sway bar you're actually feeling. It's the shock you're feeling because the shock's mounted on the outside of the frame. So that initial little bump, may actually feel different
Mhm.
because that shock is further out. So,
Well, it's certainly going to have an effect on handling on the highway,
Yeah.
especially the feel.